Hey guys, tonight we're stepping into a world that's quieter than Paris, smellier than a village cheese cave, and surprisingly full of danger. You're not a soldier, or a merchant, or even a noble. Nope, you're something much more indispensable to the rural corners of 19th century France. You're a postman. Specifically, a rural facteur, trudging through the French Alps with a rifle over your shoulder, a canvas bag of letters at your side, and, oddly enough, a pocket full of government seed packets. It's not glamorous, but it's real. And you probably won't survive this job longer than 3 winters. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, post your location and local time in the comments. I love seeing where everyone's listening from. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. It's barely light out, but you're already squinting through the alpine mist, your breath puffing like a tiny steam engine. The path ahead of you is thin, muddy, and climbs at a discouraging angle up a slate-gray ridge. Somewhere on the other side of this mountain are 3 small villages, 1 church bell tower, and at least 4 people waiting for letters they'll pretend not to care about. One of them is expecting a seed order from Lyon, but you didn't pack it because someone forgot to restock the chamomile again. On your back is a leather satchel so well worn it creaks when you move. Inside, folded carefully and separated by destination, are local tax notices, family updates, pamphlets on potato blight, and 1 suspiciously heavy envelope that smells faintly of brandy. You've learned not to ask questions. The rifle on your shoulder is technically standard issue. It's long, awkward, and heavier than you'd like to admit, but it makes you feel slightly less edible when walking through wolf territory. Also bandits. Not so much the Robin Hood type, more like the "I'll take your shoes and your hat" type. Your uniform isn't doing you any favors. The wool coat looks official but weighs roughly as much as a small cow when wet, which it often is. You adjust your scarf. A scratchy red and black hand-knit affair from an old widow in Chamonix, and plod forward, boots sinking into mud that smells faintly of turnip and sheep. As the trail turns, you catch sight of a chapel steeple in the valley below. That's your first stop. The priest there insists on chatting, even though he never gets mail. You suspect you are more postal agents or community liaisons. One school of thought says you were the state's fingers, gently poking into even the most forgotten crevices of the countryside. Another thinks you were glorified pack mules with legal paperwork. Either way, the job pays just enough to keep you fed and exactly poor enough to prevent retirement. As the sun climbs lazily over the peaks, the frost thaws on your hat brim. Birds are finally chirping, too cheerful if you're honest. The bag on your shoulder thumps with each step, and your toes have started that familiar tingle that means you should have replaced your socks 2 villages ago. You pause near a stream for a sip of water, swatting at a bug that somehow survived the cold. Behind you, a pine tree creaks in the wind. Ahead you hear bells. Church or cow, it's unclear. Either way, it means civilization, maybe a bench, possibly soup. The rifle digs into your ribs as you shift it. You wonder how many other postmen are out here right now. Dozens, maybe hundreds, scattered across hills, swamps, valleys, and ridges. All of you carrying little pieces of human life in creased paper and stained envelopes. All of you half frozen, half lost, and half asleep on your feet. You reach the chapel gate and nod to the priest, who is already walking down the steps with a pot of herbal tea and a look that says he's dying to know what Madame Eloise wrote to her sister this week. You smile politely and hand him nothing because, again, he never gets mail. But you listen, because that's what postmen do. And as you sip the tea, your feet aching and your bag feeling slightly lighter, you know there are still 12 kilometers to go. 3 more villages, a bag of beet seeds, a questionable love letter you're trying not to read through the envelope. You set out again, tea warmth still lingering in your belly, rifle shifted to your other shoulder to even out the ache. The path narrows here, snaking through a forested slope where moss covers everything. Stones, tree trunks, even the unfortunate bench you once sat on and later regretted. It's quiet, too quiet, and your boots crunch on fallen pine needles like you're stepping on potato chips in a cathedral. This is where the real reason for your rifle comes in. The postmen of 19th century France weren't issued guns just to look dramatic in paintings. These weren't friendly trails. They were crisscrossed by smugglers, bandits, and wolves. Not metaphorical wolves, actual, 4-legged, hungry wolves that might decide your sack of mail smells delicious. And then there were the desperate types. Men who'd lost their land, their families, or their minds during one of France's many spasms of revolution or economic collapse. The mountains don't judge, but they also don't protect. So the government, in its peculiar logic, gave you a uniform, a gun, and instructions like, make sure the village gets their mail, try not to die. You paused to check a wooden marker, scratched over with initials and worn almost smooth. These signs are unofficial, a kind of secret language shared by rural postmen. Watch for rockfall here, says one. Another, you remember, simply reads, do not trust the goat. That one's personal. It was in 1835 when the government first began allowing postmen in the most dangerous rural regions to carry arms, not as soldiers, but as self-defending civil servants. Not everyone approved. Historians still argue whether arming civil workers was a necessary measure or a symbol of just how little protection the state could offer outside its cities. But nobody asked the wolves. The rifle itself is a clumsy old musket-style piece, not something you'd want in a quick fight, but better than a stern look. You've only fired it twice, once into the air when a boar got too friendly, and once by accident when you tripped over a pine cone and nearly shot a beehive. Lesson learned. The trees thin and open to a rocky outcrop overlooking a steep drop into mist. You adjust your footing, careful not to slip. One wrong step and you'd be tumbling towards the valley floor, letters fluttering behind you like sad little paper wings. There's a memory that returns here always. The first time you walked this route, younger, less sore, and wildly unprepared. Back then the bag felt heavier from nerves. Now it's just the usual dull ache across your shoulder blade. You've long stopped wondering if anyone her shawl pulled tight. Holding a basket of what looks like suspiciously withered onions. Mail? She asks without preamble. You hand her a single folded letter. Her hands tremble slightly as she takes it, and she tucks it into her blouse like it's something holy. You stopped wondering what's in the letters. Some are boring, some dramatic, some so filled with longing you can practically feel it radiating through the envelope. But they're never nothing. That's the strange magic of paper, how it carries human weight. The villagers nod to you as you pass. No small talk today. Maybe they sense the fog moving in behind you, or maybe they're just out of brandy. You deliver 3 more letters, a newspaper, and 1 small packet of sunflower seeds, then duck into the baker's shop to warm your hands. She offers you the heel of a loaf. You accept it with the same reverence some people give diamonds. Out again, back into the cold. You spot tracks in the mud, hooved, scattered, not fresh. A pack mule, maybe, or a traveling tinker. Either way, you grip the rifle a little tighter, just in case. You still remember what happened last year when a pair of traveling gamblers tried to trade you a pigeon for stamps. You declined. There's an old bridge up ahead, narrow, creaky, held together more by stubbornness than engineering. One of your co-workers once slipped here, sprained an ankle, and delivered mail crawling on all 4s for 2 days. He earned a medal, a literal medal, for dedication. He uses it as a bottle opener now. You cross the bridge carefully, counting the boards as you go. 7 creak, 1 groans, none break. Past the stream, the wind picks up. You lower your head, hat pulled down, coat flapping like a drunk kite. You glance back once, just in time to see a cluster of children waving from a cottage window. You wave back, rifle swinging slightly, and accidentally whack yourself in the hip. Smooth. There are easier jobs. Jobs that don't involve loaded weapons and thunderous cliffs and goats with vendettas. But none of them connect a nation, letter by letter, pocket by pocket, seed by seed. And certainly none of them come with stories this good. Section 3. The clouds creep in, low and lazy now, sliding over the treetops like spilled cream. You tighten your coat against the chill and press forward into the ever-thickening fog. Somewhere ahead, your next destination waits. A cluster of 3 houses that barely qualify as a hamlet, nestled in a curve of hillside, so tucked away you could miss it even if you fell into it. It's always the same every week. Letters for the elderly couple with the chickens, a folded church bulletin for the shoemaker who hasn't made a shoe in 15 years, and once, a poem mailed to a goat. No one ever explained that one. But before you reach those familiar doors, the weather decides to make things interesting. A flake of snow lands on your nose, then another, and then, with the theatrical flair of a Parisian opera diva, the sky begins to dump snow like it's been saving up all week. You sigh, adjust your rifle strap, and trudge onward, one boot sinking after another into the rapidly whitening trail. Snow isn't new, but this kind of snow, thick, wet, and eager to destroy your sense of direction, is the kind that slows everything down and threatens to turn a simple mail run into a survival story. Back in town, they romanticize your work. You're a symbol of perseverance, they say. The brave soul threading communication through the wilderness. What they forget is that sometimes that wilderness actively tries to eat you. You're halfway up a slope when your foot slips, sending you skidding briefly into a low bush that smells like frozen rosemary and regret. The mailbag shifts dangerously on your shoulder, and the seed packets inside rustle like they're nervous too. This isn't just bad weather. It's the kind of snowstorm that causes people to name their children after the survivors. Historians still argue whether rural postal workers like you were allowed to delay their rounds in extreme weather. Some records suggest discretion. Others imply the state preferred you to deliver soaked, half-frozen letters than be late. You suspect it depends on whether the official asking the question has ever walked through a storm like this with numb toes and a damp lunch. You reach a bend in the road that curves into a small copse of trees. The same trees that, 2 winters ago, nearly became your final resting place when you mistook a frozen puddle for solid ground. Today, thankfully, your boots find enough traction. Your first stop appears through the snow. Barely visible, roof sagging under snow weight, chimney puffing, the door already ajar. You knock anyway, then push it open. Inside, the shoemaker snores peacefully by the fire. You place the bulletin beside him and resist the temptation to warm your hands. He won't notice you were here, but if you don't show up, he'll write a complaint in wobbly cursive to the postmaster. The third house has a surprise. You knock, but instead of the usual old farmer, the door swings wide to reveal a girl no older than 10, her cheeks flushed pink from cold and her braids stiff with frost. "Papa says the goat has eaten the letter," she says deadpan. You blink. Did he want a replacement? She thinks. "He said to tell you it tasted political." You sigh and hand her a spare newspaper. "Try this one, it's yesterday's." She nods solemnly. "The goat prefers satire." You tip your cap and move on. Now the wind's biting, really biting. Your rifle is iced over, the metal unpleasantly cold through your glove. The seed packets have started to stick together slightly. There's a damp patch at the bottom of the mail bag you choose to believe is melted snow and not something leaking from the medicinal parcel you picked up in Bonneval. The path ahead splits. Left winds around a ridge, safer but longer. Right cuts through an open field where the snow piles in unpredictable drifts. You go left. You've done the right path before. You remember crawling out of a waist-high snow trap with a boot full of beetroot seeds and a very strong opinion about snow angels. As you round the ridge, the view briefly opens. A frozen valley floor, distant herds like pepper flakes on white linen, smoke rising from distant chimneys. That's where you're headed. Still a few kilometers to go, but the hardest stretch is behind you, hopefully. There's a crow perched on a signpost as you pass. It watches you, judgmental and silent, like it's calculating your odds. You salute it with a gloved hand. "Not today," you whisper. You reach a small overhang and take your first real break of the day. Knees sore, spine aching, hands thawing only slightly. You pour a bit of water from your flask and chew on a heel of cheese that may or may not be older than the Republic. There's still some onion left from Madame Auber's generous offering. You eat it because, frankly, your standards dropped 2 mountains ago. And despite it all, your wet socks, your frozen rifle, your sandwich that smells like laundry soap, there's a kind of peace to this life. A rhythm. 1 foot, 1 letter, 1 village at a time. You adjust your satchel, letters still to deliver, seed packets still to drop off. 1 envelope that keeps slipping to the bottom no matter how many times you... The storm eases as you descend into the lower valley, the snow softening into gentle flurries that swirl more poetically than they fall. Trees bow under white weight, and the road, if you can still call it that, reappears in patches of brown slush and frozen hoofprints. You shake the melted snow off your hat, stretch your aching shoulders, and pull a seed packet from your inner coat pocket, just to make sure it's still dry. It's marked turnips, approved for spring distribution. A dull little label, but in these mountains, it's practically a promise. A whisper of life buried in paper and ink. You tuck it back in place and keep moving. This village is one of your seed drop-off points. Every few weeks, you're required to distribute small bundles of seeds along with your mail, part of a national effort to educate and equip rural farmers. Some say it's charity, others call it propaganda. Historians still argue whether this initiative was a noble attempt at agricultural reform or a sneaky way for the state to monitor local crop yields. Either way, you're the delivery system. The farmer you're looking for lives at the edge of the village in a squat stone house with an eternal smell of wet hay. You find him bent over a trough, mumbling to a pig that looks like it's seen too much. "Mail?" he grunts without turning. You hand over a single letter, probably from his cousin in Grenoble, the one who always signs with a drawing of a flower. "Seeds?" he adds. You pull out a neatly folded packet and place it beside the trough. He nods once and goes back to discussing philosophy with the pig. As you leave, you hear him say, "No, Bernard, you can't eat the turnips before they grow." You pass 3 more homes, each receiving their fair share of state-approved flora. Barley, lettuce, beans, even a small sachet of lavender for a woman who insists it keeps her chickens from swearing. The seed program started after a few particularly brutal winters in the 1830s, when poor harvests and food shortages led to protests, hunger, and, unsurprisingly, more protests. The government, perhaps desperate to appear helpful, decided that education alone wouldn't cut it. They needed dirt and things to put in it. So they weaponized the postman. You're now expected to carry knowledge and nourishment, letters and legumes. It's a noble mission, though your spine might disagree. Seed packets jostle awkwardly in your satchel, nestled among letters, receipts, and one envelope that smells faintly of dried fish. You've learned to pack them carefully. No one wants to explain why your rifle now more of a balancing rod than a weapon. The children run beside you for a bit, throwing snowballs at each other and narrowly missing your knees. One of them, a freckled boy with a stick and a wild imagination, insists you're a soldier disguised as a postman. "Secret mission?" he whispers. "Yes," you whisper back. "I'm smuggling lettuce seeds past enemy goats." His eyes go wide. "Spy seeds?" "Tell no one." You march off with your best mysterious stride, leaving him giddy with conspiracy. There's one more stop before you leave this village behind. A tiny schoolhouse barely held together with mud and prayers. The teacher, a middle-aged woman with chalk-stained fingers and the patience of a saint, greets you at the door with the familiar look of someone who knows you've brought her both joy and trouble. "Anything for me?" You nod and hand over a small envelope, plus a packet of wildflower seeds she didn't ask for but always appreciates. "Trying to make the place prettier," she says. "It's working." You lie. The school children watch you as you leave, faces pressed to the window. One waves. Another sticks out his tongue. You return both gestures and move on. The next leg of the route is quiet. Just you, the sound of crunching snow, and the constant creak of your shoulder strap. You whistle a bit, mostly to keep your own company. The tune warbles. Your breath fogs the air. Back in Paris, they picture postmen as men in carriages, neatly gliding between lamplit boulevards with a stack of polite letters and a schedule that fits on a napkin. Out here, you carry seeds like a mobile garden gnome, and letters written in handwriting so illegible it might be a code. You cross bridges that no longer qualify as structures. You dodge cows. You translate love notes. You answer farming questions you're wholly unqualified for. And still, you keep walking. You spot a faded wooden sign at a fork in the path. The left arrow points to Sourire and is nearly worn away. The right arrow says, "Here be mud." You sigh. Sourire it is. The path narrows, lined with bare bushes, and in the distance you hear a crow caw like it's disappointed in you again. You mutter, "You're not even the weirdest thing I've delivered to today." And then, with aching legs, frozen fingers, and a satchel still half full, you keep going.